Hello, this is Controlled Pairs with Controlled Pairs Gaming, and today I am bringing you part 4 and the conclusion of our moon drilling series. I'm going to start today's video by saying if you enjoyed the series and you like the other content that you've seen on my channel, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed. I'm trying to get up to 50 subscribers by the end of the month, and I'd really appreciate it if you help me out with that goal. So here you see a single stage to orbit spaceplane piloted by Valentina that I've designed for this mission specifically. If you aren't sure what's going on right now and you need to get caught up with the series, feel free to click on parts 1 through 3, which I'm linking right now. Go ahead and click on them. But if you are caught up, we see Valentina taking off and taking this SSTO into orbit. I've left the entire launch phase in here, so if you want to skip it, just click forward to about 2.5–3 minutes into the video. But the reason I showed it is because SSTOs have changed so much in KSP 1.0. Rather than taking off vertically and then getting to a very high altitude and gaining horizontal velocity, it seems now that the best strategy is to design crafts that have a really high thrust to weight ratio. So you see here I've put 3 Rapier engines on the back of this thing, and its thrust to weight ratio is actually very high, and it exceeds Mach 3 before it even reaches 15,000 meters off of the ground. So I choose a ascent profile of about 45 degrees, and I start climbing very rapidly, and you see those Mach effects, and we start to get some heating effects as well. But I found that if I choose this specific ascent profile, that I don't risk overheating and damaging any part of the spacecraft. Now let's talk about the mission. So in parts 1 through 3, we've surveyed the surface of the moon. We've landed a rover and surveyed specifically for a location on the moon in which to land a moon drill. We've landed that moon drill and a rover to transport fuel from that drill into orbit around the moon. In this final episode, we are taking this SSTO into a low Kerbal orbit. We are going to dock with our refueling platform in orbit around Kerbal. Then we are going to conduct a transfer burn to the moon, capture the moon in a low Munar orbit. We're going to bring the rover from the surface of the moon up to a low Munar orbit, dock with that fueler, and then return all the way back to the Kerbal Space Center, all with an SSTO. So it's a very complicated mission. There's several docking maneuvers, several refueling maneuvers, and we're controlling 2 craft throughout. So there's a lot going on here. As you see, I've circularized around Kerbal, and we've got an intersect with our first refueling platform, which is just a small space station, a refueling station that I put in a low Kerbal orbit. So here we've intersected with that refueling platform, and we go ahead and turn on the RCS, open up our shielded docking port, and move into the refueling station to top off on liquid fuel and oxidizer before doing our transfer to the moon. I didn't show the entire docking sequence, and I've actually cut down a lot of the video. The entire mission took me right around an hour, and I tried to get this down to 10 minutes. I think I managed to get it to about 12, so bear with me, and there is actually a lot going on, and a lot you can learn from it for sure. So once we get good contact here, you see it's bouncing around a little bit, so I disengage the SAS to ensure that we get a good dock with the refueling station. Once we do, we go ahead and start the tedious task of transferring all of that liquid fuel and oxidizer to the SSTO. And we're actually able to completely top off the SSTO, which gives us plenty of fuel, plenty of delta V to conduct our transfer to the moon, and then conduct our second docking maneuver with the Munar refueler. So here Valentina, having refueled, goes ahead and undocks and uses her RCS thrusters to back away from the refueling platform. Next, I plan my transfer burn to the moon, and I get ready to take this SSTO all the way into a Munar orbit. That's pretty. So after we back away from the refueling platform, we get aligned to our maneuver node, and we start a 30-second burn, which will transfer us to the moon, making sure to close that shielded docking port. We successfully transfer to the moon and move to the Parapsis and conduct our capture. At first I hadn't selected exactly what kind of orbit I wanted, so I just went ahead and set it right around 40K off of the lunar surface. Next we go down to the Munar drill, which you remember from our previous videos, and we start by undocking the Munar Fueler and backing it away from the craft. Move it a safe distance from the Munar drill. Make sure it's in VTOL mode. Go ahead and target slingshot that SSTO with a plan to intersect with it. And then we go ahead and take off. The goal here is to get about a 30 to 35,000 kilometer orbit going around the moon, and then conduct our docking maneuvers with the SSTO and the Munar Fueler. The Munar Fueler is completely full, having converted all of that ore on the surface of the moon into liquid fuel and oxidizer and monopropellant. Once we get up to when it's time to circularize, we extend our solar panels on the Munar Fueler in order to make sure that we retain an adequate electric charge. And we begin our circularization burn, which should take us only about 15 seconds. And we quickly and expeditiously execute that with no real problems. I'm very satisfied with how well the vertical takeoff and landing feature works for this rover. It's very well balanced. I wasn't even using the mechanics to orient on the maneuver node there. I was just using SAS, and it stayed centered the entire time without even touching the WASD keys, which I'm really happy with. So having circularized our orbit, we jump back over to the SSTO, move to the ascending or descending node, and make sure that we are on the same plane as the Munar Fueler. Set up our next maneuver node, which will put us on an intersection with the Munar Fueler, and burn retrograde, just 1 second, about 50 delta V, and you see we've got a good intersection at 2.5 kilometers on the other side of the moon. Then we switch over to our RCS, and we get in nice and close to the Munar Fueler, and we begin our orbital docking procedures just like we did over the surface of Kerbal whenever we docked with that first refueling platform. So same thing here, except this time we're refueling at the moon, which was the whole point of bringing this drill and refining vessel all the way to the moon. And we're finally seeing it in practice. So we jump in the cockpit with Valentina. And something interesting I noticed here, I wanted to dock from inside the cockpit, but I noticed the nav ball in this cockpit is not an accurate reflection of what is going on in the world. So something I hope Squad realizes and gets fixed really quick, because it's fun to dock from inside the cockpit, but you just can't do it accurately with the nav ball right now. So I'm forced to kind of eyeball it here, and it's sloppy to say the least. So we slide in there, we get good contact with the Munar Fueler, successfully dock, and Valentina is now refueling in orbit around the moon in an SSTO. An outstanding feat. So once again, we begin that meticulous process of transferring all that liquid fuel over to our SSTO, and undocking and closing that shielded docking port. Valentina once again has a fully fueled SSTO and plenty of fuel to enjoy the rest of her orbit around the moon, and then transfer back to Kerbal and land at the Kerbal Space Center. But first we've got to put our Munar rover, our fueler, back on the surface of the moon, co-located with that drill, which is just a basic landing technique just like any other craft that you landed. So we go ahead and burn retrograde and set up our suborbital trajectory with the Munar drill and begin to descend to the surface of the moon. As you can see, we're about 18 kilometers away from the drill and right on target. So we'll go ahead and fast forward to the surface and show the VTOL action once again with this rover lowering itself down, and it's still got over 200 units of fuel and oxidizer remaining by the time that it gets back to the surface. So capability-wise, it can take off, achieve a 35-kilometer orbit around the moon, transfer one entire tank of fuel to an SSTO, fully topping it off, and then return safely to the surface of the moon, which is exactly what it was designed to do when we first started this whole endeavor, and we did our first proof of concept in part 1. So now we've captured Kerbal again, we've done our transfer burn, and now we are doing our deceleration burn, our aerobraking burn, in order to put our suborbital trajectory back at the Kerbal Space Center. So Valentina, now preparing to land at Kerbal Space Center, puts away her solar panels so that they are not broken off during re-entry, and then prepares for the heating effects and the Mach effects that come with the challenge of re-entry now in Kerbal Space Program 1.0. So we open up our air intakes. We make sure those Rapier engines are in air-breathing mode. We are completely out of oxidizer at this point, having burned all the way back from the moon. But we have 201 units left of liquid fuel, so plenty of jet fuel in order to get back to the Space Center. We are getting some heating effects, though. You see those thermometers are rising pretty quickly, and that's actually kind of surprising, particularly as we're only going about 1,200 meters per second, and we're still pretty high in the atmosphere. I've deployed the air brakes, which is the reason that the craft is so hard to control right now, and I think that's just going to be something I need to work on. If you've seen my other videos, it's I always have problems getting SSTOs to re-enter the atmosphere in an organized or controlled manner, but I identified the problem here was when I did my refuel over the moon and I transfer all that fuel into the tanks, they were slightly off balance. I put just a little bit too much in one of those tanks on the side of the aircraft, and so the center of mass was slightly off. So having activated those jet engines, now we transfer all that fuel back into this center tank, and our center of mass is good to go. And we cruise all the way back to Kerbal Space Center, jump in the cockpit with Valentina, who has eyes on the runway, and begins to line it up. So after that long journey, after episodes 1, 2, and 3, and all of that hard work that we did throughout this whole process, Valentina Kerman is landing her SSTO at KST, having taken it all the way to the moon, conducted 2 refuels, and brought it all the way home safely. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the series. If you did, show the love by liking the video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the page. I really appreciate it. And if you want more of this content, the best way for you to let me know to create more of it is to interact with the page. So until next time, this is Controlled Pairs signing off.